What's up everybody and welcome to the Gooner channel. And well, look, the summer transfer window may be yet to open officially, but of course that's where everybody's attention is being drawn. The news today that Benjamin Sesko has apparently decided to stay at RB Leipzig and accepted a contract renewal, albeit one which contains a gentleman's agreement that he will be allowed to leave in future for the right offer. And on that note, wouldn't it make more sense to just put a release clause in the contract? After all, isn't that the very point of contracts, that gentlemen's agreements don't mean anything if the stakes get high enough? But in any case, he is staying at RB Leipzig, and it was a surprise. He had always said that he wanted his future sorted before the Euros, and that should have been a clue actually, because despite the consensus among all the in-the-knows that Arsenal were going to swoop for Benjamin Sesko, probably wouldn't have been possible before July, and that's because of everybody's favourite new addition to the football lexicon, PSR, profit and sustainability. Yes, the regulations dictate that players signed before July count to the previous season's accounting. You only have to ask Nottingham Forest how serious the ramifications of getting that wrong can be. So we may never know how seriously we courted Šeško. Sesko himself said that Arteta made a very strong pitch, but with that deal dead, at least in the short term, and everyone convinced that Arsenal desperately need a striker, talk has turned immediately to our plan B. And that's what I'm going to be discussing in this video. We're going to take a look at all the potential strikers who might come to Arsenal in this summer transfer window and weigh up how likely it is and whether it's a good idea or not. So if you like this kind of content, then click like and subscribe, because in the transfer window, I am going to be doing a show every single day, not just discussing the gossip, but really trying to dig deep to find out how much truth there is to it. So as we crack on, depending on where you get your gossip at the moment, you will either have heard that Joshua Zirkzee is about to undergo a medical, or that Mikel Arteta has somehow sweet-talked Manchester City's Julian Alvarez to come to Arsenal. But beyond those stories are, of course, the old favourites, Solanke and Guirassy. Are any of them credible? At the start of the window, we were most heavily linked with big money signings like Alexander Isak at Newcastle and Victor Osimhen from Napoli. But just under a week ago, Isak responded to the speculation linking him with a mega money move to the Arsenal by saying how much he loved Newcastle, how much he was enjoying playing there, how he'd had the best season of his life and had not thought at all about moving. Eddie Howe has been outspoken about how there's no chance that Newcastle will sell Alexander Isak, and they slapped a £180 million transfer fee on him. Now look, I know that Newcastle are likely to have to sell one or two players they don't want to, but I think they've ring-fenced Alexander Isak, and I would say rightly so, because he is clearly the best option we would have. He's Premier League proven, the right age, versatile, exciting to watch. Isak seems like a deal that's going to be too hard to do. The other big money signing is Victor Osimhen, and in the last couple of days, all the reports have been that Arsenal have told Napoli president Aurelio De Laurentiis that they would not meet his valuation for Victor Osimhen. Now, Laurentiis is known as a really tough negotiator, and last season he joked that it would take a more than indecent proposal to move to pry away his top goal scorer, going on to say it would require a monstrous sum of money and that there was, in all likelihood, only one club in the world that could afford it, and that was PSG. Of course, PSG's appetite for huge spending is certainly not what it was. Mbappe's recent defection to Real Madrid for free has cost them hundreds of millions, and they still have not lifted that European trophy they spent so lavishly to win. Now, they seem to have given up trying to buy the Champions League, and with Luis Enrique at the helm, they're looking to a more developmental style to bring in young players and develop them. But as for Victor Osimhen, things have changed since last season as well. It now seems really unlikely that he will still be a Napoli player for the start of next season. There's been some bizarre PR fails by Napoli over the last year that have damaged the player's relationship with the club and fans, seemingly irretrievably. And Osimhen seems also to have been further annoyed by recent comments that Laurentiis made around possibly selling Osimhen. Now, Antonio Conte is the new Napoli manager, and he seems to have his heart set on reuniting with Romelu Lukaku, with whom he won Serie A for Inter in 21. It's hard. It's you never really think of Romelu Lukaku, and he's a player I'm glad we're not linked with, but at the same time I am slightly surprised. Chelsea still hold Romelu Lukaku's registration, and there is no chance that he's going to be putting on a shirt for the Blues. But Chelsea are sticking, they have their own money troubles after all, to his 38 million release clause, which is tiny when you think of the reputation that Lukaku has. But Napoli will need to sell in order to meet it because they're not flush either. And so are Arsenal just playing hardball with Laurentis? Are we telling them that we don't want to spend £110 million on his release fee because we want to try and drum the price down a little bit? Have we turned our attention away from the Nigerian frontman? If we are just a world-class striker away from finally wresting the Premier League from City's evil clutches, then surely, even at the reported 110 million release clause, Osimhen is a bargain. Unlike Šeško and Xerxes, who are both young and have potential to be prolific strikers, Osimhen is a finished article, scoring consistently over the last 4 years. Perhaps this reflects the fact that Arsenal need to spend across a few areas. Now, I'm not personally convinced that a striker should be our priority. I know I'm ploughing a lonely furrow here, but I see a more pressing need to sign a midfielder. As it stands, we have Declan Rice, who plays every minute when fit, Thomas Partey, who's very rarely fit, and Jorginho, who's not necessarily the sort of player you'd play week in, week out. And we know Lukonga's leaving, and after that, I really don't know who you'd play in DM. It's a key position in Arteta's setup, and good DMs don't come cheap. So I would prioritise there. More discussion on that in the coming days, I'm sure. But for now, we are looking at strikers. So I'm going to get back to that. There have been reports that Arsenal aren't looking to spend big this window. But that might change as well if we do end up selling well, because we are looking to sell Reece Nelson, Eddie Nketiah, sadly Emil Smith-Rowe and Fabio Vieira. These are all players that could go. And if they all went and they generated 100 million plus, then that could see us break the 200 million in transfers for the second summer in a row. Now, then again, if that's true, if they do all leave, we're going to lose quite a few players. Surely we're going to need to bring in an equal number. Look, Arteta has been criticised for not using players off the bench enough, but not having anyone on the bench is hardly going to be the solution now, is it? So where does this leave us? Look, I was disappointed that Benjamin Sesko chose to stay at Leipzig, but not because I felt that he was a missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle. I see him as a player with a huge potential ceiling who may well go on to be someone who nets a lot of goals, but probably not for a year or two. He may well have made the right decision in staying at Leipzig for his long-term future. He could have gone on to any number of clubs when he left RB Salzburg, including us, but he wanted to go to a new club that would still be familiar. So he stayed within the Red Bull family. And I think too often players leave for big clubs as soon as they can, but then struggle in their new surroundings, and it does them more harm than good. Following Balogun might be in that category, and it's mad to think it was only last year I was hoping we'd keep hold of him because I saw so much promise. He's had a pretty unspectacular season for Monaco. I do still think he'll come good and there's still hope around him. But Xerxes is a player who's really exciting to watch. He's the first default plan B that everyone's talking about. He has something like a £34 million release clause, has just won Serie A's Young Player of the Year. He has the world at his silkily skillful feet. That kind of release clause makes him a huge potential bargain. But it's not necessarily obvious to me where you'd play him. As with Šeško, he needs time to learn and adapt. I doubt he'd fire us to the title, and it's probably not fair to expect that of him. AC Milan have made a really big bid for him, and we'd have to get in between that. I'm not sure he's going to choose us over AC Milan. But Joshua Zirkzee is hardly that kind of out-and-out number 9 anyway. Both these players, Šeško and Xerxes, make little sense as marquee signings this summer if the aim is to buy goals. Look, they make perfect sense if you're looking to replace Eddie on the bench and have a different option available to come on. But if you're looking for a proven goal-getter, then the list gets very short indeed. Top of the list, of course, Harry Kane. Arguably the best striker in Europe, possibly the world. There's so many reasons why that's not going to happen. I don't need to go into them here. Just below him as the second highest goal scorer across Europe's top 5 leagues. Do you know who it is? Would you guess? Well, VfB Stuttgart's Serhou Guirassy, who scored 28 goals in 28 appearances at the age of 28. He is older than the typical profile of an Arsenal signing of recent years. But that's not really why I don't think there have been strong links. It's, I think, down to the fact that this season's goals have been so completely unexpected. Over the last 10 years, he's always struggled to get into double figures. And no one predicted he'd bag as many as he has. And I don't think anyone's really that confident he will again. With the reported release clause of 15 million, there's not much risk there. But I'm not sure I'd see him as an upgrade on Eddie either. The next on the list are Haaland and then Mbappe. Fairly obvious we won't be signing either of them. Then comes Lautaro Martinez. He's just signed a contract extension with Inter Milan and he's not going anywhere. And if he was, it would be silly, silly money. But he's a fantastic player. I think we all know that. Next is Lois Openda. Now, this one's interesting because he's a player who was linked with a move to Arsenal in January. He's Šeško's strike partner at Leipzig and a Belgian international. Really good goal scoring record in 3 European leagues in almost as many seasons. And he apparently has a release clause of just £70 million. So surely not out of our price range. Why isn't there more speculation linking us with him? It might be that he just doesn't quite pass the eye test. He can look awkward. He's strong but not imposing. He's fast but not blistering. And a lot of his game is about being deep with the ball, and he doesn't pass that well. I have difficulty seeing him as an elite level footballer, and I would worry that he might not fit Arteta's mould. He's definitely not versatile enough. I could be wrong. I might live to regret that. That might be the clip. Me saying that, and he comes to Arsenal and scores 50 goals in the season. I just don't think he passes the eye test, and I think that has something to do with it. But otherwise, you would expect him to be far more strongly linked. Certainly, if we're after Šeško, why wouldn't you go for his more prolific strike partner? He's only 24 years old. Now, Artem Dovbyk, the Ukrainian whose first season at Girona could hardly have gone any better. He was La Liga's top goal scorer, which is not shabby, is it? And he's just ahead of Alexander Zorloth, who's another one that massively outperformed his XG, might never reach the same level again. There's a good chance that we are going to be strongly linked with one or both of these players, but for now, doesn't really seem a lot of interest. Closer to home, the obvious candidate is Ollie Watkins, a lifelong Arsenal fan who's talked in the past about how it would be a dream to play for Arsenal, how he always looked up to Thierry Henry. But Villa are going to do absolutely everything they can to make it impossible for us, including setting an asking price higher than, or at least as high as Victor Osimhen or Alexander Isak. And that for me is a tough one. If you can get Osimhen or Ollie Watkins, let me know in the comments which one you go for. I think I'd go Osimhen. I like Ollie Watkins a lot, but again, I don't think he lifts us. I don't think he takes us to a level we aren't able to get to without him. I might be being harsh. Again, let me know in the comments. But all the talk around Ivan Toney has evaporated with Ivan Toney's goals. I've been outspoken and vocal, you know I have, on not rating Ivan Toney. I always found it incredible that people saw him as a 20-goal-a-season striker just because he managed 19 in one season and 7 of those were from the spot. Since he came back from his 8-month ban, he scored 4 goals. In the same period, Kai Havertz has scored 9. Enough said, surely. So out of all of the ones I've listed, who would you like to see come to Arsenal? If I have to go for one, it's Victor Osimhen. I do feel like he's the most likely to get goals. As much as Laurentis wants big money, the only hope that he's going to get big money is going to come from Saudi. Victor doesn't seem keen at this stage of his career. Chelsea may well be able to find the money, although I have no idea how, given their problems with profit sustainability. And as I've already said, PSG are not in the market for big signings, although I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. There isn't as much money floating around thanks to all of these profit and sustainability and fair play regulations. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to talk about where that's concerned over the coming months because it's going to have a tangible effect on the transfer window. You could almost feel it. Clubs like Manchester United always get thrown into the mix, but the big problems that these clubs have is they're not playing in the Champions League, and players like Victor Osimhen I think are going to want to play for Champions League clubs. So in England, where Osimhen has always talked about wanting to play, Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool and Aston Villa are the choices. And I think we're the only one of that group that's in the market for a striker. Although I will repeat myself again and say, do we need a striker that badly? Wouldn't you rather spend money elsewhere? Wouldn't you rather wait until Šeško does want to come and he's had a good season under his belt? Let me know in the comments which of these strikers you'd like to see come to Arsenal. Or if you're more like me and you think that rather than a goal scorer, what we really need is a bit of a shithouse. I hate to say it. The more I think about it, the more I sort of warm towards the idea of Bruno Guimaraes. The thing that we used to have in Arsenal winning sides, league title winning sides, was a bit of a shithouse somewhere in there. And maybe we're just lacking that. Maybe we are just a tiny bit too nice across the board. Anyway, let me know in the comments how you feel. And until I see you tomorrow for a discussion around our youth academy, which is long overdue. So tune in tomorrow for that. But until I see you then, be lucky and lots of love.